Hey there, my name's Mark McCartney, and welcome to the What is a Good Life podcast. First of all, after almost a year of the podcast now, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone who's subscribed, who's downloading the podcast on the podcasting platforms and leaving lovely reviews as well. It's all greatly appreciated, and I'm really excited to see where this podcast goes next year. This episode is out a couple of days later this week as I've taken a little bit of time off from the holidays. So I hope you've all had a glorious time over the holidays yourselves, and normal business shall resume next week with Tuesday releases of the podcast. So that brings us to this week's episode, which is the 50th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. To those of you that haven't listened before, over the last 2 years, I've interviewed over 170 people around this question. The objective is not to find a universal answer, but to help you find and define your own answer to this question. Well, I also want to share more genuine reflections of the human experience. On the 50th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast, I'm delighted to introduce Claire McQuillan as our guest. Claire is currently completing a master's in architecture, where she explores the dynamics of sex work in urban settings. Additionally, she shares her life's insights and experiences in a newsletter that I follow, Alice Claire. During our conversation, Claire shares her recent realization that she isn't an architect, despite a decade of studying and working in this field. We delve into the intricate process of letting go of roles and labels that we self-identify with, exploring both what helps and hinders us in these experiences. Claire also shares her journey as a 30-year-old single mother to her teenage son, Sebastian. We discuss the joys and strains of parenting, finding meaning and purpose, and the societal pressures and lots of advice that generally accompany the role of a parent. Finally, we explore the significance of local neighbourhood community. Claire and I both reside in the same neighbourhood in Berlin, and we reflect on the profound impact of a fully connected local community on our lives. Whether you find yourself grappling with letting go of self-identifications, navigating the complexity of parenting amidst societal pressures, or simply curious about fostering more local community in your life, this episode offers ample food for thought. As you'll hear shortly in the conversation you're about to hear, Claire also works part-time as a barista in my local cafe. I really wanted to interview Claire because, firstly, I think she has some really profound experiences from her experience as a single mother. While whether it's in the conversations I have with her or even in following her newsletter, I also think that she has a really genuine way of expressing herself, which you don't find every day. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And if you enjoy this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're on the podcasting platforms, please continue to leave your reviews, as I greatly appreciate your support at this stage of my podcasting journey. And so without further ado, I'd like to wish you a happy new year and hopefully a great one for us all next year. And so for now, the 50th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. Claire, thank you very much for joining me here on the What is a Good Life podcast. It's very strange to see you over a screen as opposed to in person. And I'm very grateful to have you here, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Mark. Good point. We always see each other over the counter at the cafe, and it's nice to have a proper conversation without customers needing something from me or.
Claire, as I always kick these things off, it is with the question of, is there a question you're trying to answer as you move through life?
Yes, there are many questions. I don't think I can just narrow it down to one, but I think especially right now as I'm coming towards the end of a chapter where I'm finishing my master thesis, I'm really just wondering like what is my place in this world? Like what's my role? What am I supposed to be doing? Who can I help? Like, yeah, what's my place? That's kind of really messing with my head at the moment. And I'm very busy thinking about big picture things. Yeah.
And at this point, what's your kind of journey with that question up until this point?
Well, I think today was the first time I voiced it out loud to my dad, who's an architect, and I'm studying architecture. I said, I'm not an architect. And that was the first time I said that out loud. I'm not an architect. I may have
Right.
studied for it for a very long time. I've worked as an architect, but that's not me. So, of course, that's like a bit scary because I've spent the last 10 or so years thinking that was what I was going to be doing. And now I'm kind of, yeah, trying to figure out what else I can do with the skills that I've acquired, with the knowledge that I've acquired. But yeah, I'm not really sure yet what that means.
What the hell did that feel like to say that out loud, when kind of partially identifying as that up until this point?
Super terrifying, but also really freeing, like a huge weight falling off my shoulders, I guess. But yeah, scary, very scary. It's a very loaded thing. I mean, like the fact that my dad is an architect, there's always been a pressure, I think, for me to follow in those footsteps. It's something that I've spent the last 10 years learning. So there's the pressure of like, oh, have I wasted my time learning this? And also, my future, like, how will I be earning money or what will I be doing? So there's like a lot weighing on it, on this identity of an architect. But it also feels freeing because I finally was able to admit something to myself that I guess I knew for a longer time than I thought, but just saying it out loud felt very freeing.
Isn't that like I find that such an interesting part of life, like the way things can be simultaneously like scary and then really relieving as well. Like I don't know, from my perspective, it's even stepping away from finance, although I didn't know what the hell I was going to do next. And I knew I really didn't want to do that anymore. I still felt really I don't know, to show up in this world and not have like a one word answer for what do you do or what are you? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, to when people ask me, like, even now, what are you doing? And I'm still like, kind of fumbling, coaching, and I do this podcast thing and I do this writing stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
when I don't have, even though I feel very alive with what I'm doing, it's amazing. I think from my perspective, anyway, how even if we're not attached to it anymore, or even if we don't want it anymore, not having that one word, I think, is it's almost like a security blanket.
Yeah, of course. And it's got so many reasons for why we feel scared. I mean, there's the way we've been socialized or brought up, that there's just only one thing out there for you, or you just kind of follow this one direct path. And then there's also, I guess, just, yeah, not being able to define something, or just, there's a lot of multi hyphenate sort of people out there. And I didn't even know what that meant for such a long time because I thought, you can only do this one thing and be an expert at this one thing, and that's what you stick with. But I feel like, yeah, we're in, generally as a society, I think we're kind of coming around to the fact that nobody's path is just this linear thing into the future, but it's all over the place, and that's okay.
And are you getting comfortable with that yourself?
Yeah, I, in theory, totally. Like I like this kind of being a jack of all trades and trying lots of different things, and I also get overwhelmed by how many things there are to try out. I think that's also like a problem of just like there are too many choices out there. But in practice, like actually then applying that to real life, that I find really scary because then questions like how am I going to pay my rent come up, and that's where I then find it difficult to actually put those theories in place of like, oh, you can do anything and be anyone you want, but then when it actually comes down to it, I need to put food on the table and I need to pay my rent. So sometimes the most boring job is going to be doing that for me.
And what do you find, like, Claire, in terms of like what gives you then comfort in even making this decision, like, or what freed you up enough to do that, in terms of, like, to embrace that kind of uncertainty, or almost to embrace the task of proving your theory, so to speak.
I'm not sure if I like understand your question completely, but the way kind of interpreting it is that I think it's really important for myself to surround myself with people who are proving this kind of theory already, who are doing different things and trying different things, and also falling on their ass doing different things, like failing and showing me that it's okay to fail and life goes on after that. So I find that very helpful. Like just in my circle of close friends, I've got a lot of freelance friends who are just hustling, I guess, and making it happen. So that's very inspiring. And just being creative for me has always helped because creativity to me, there isn't like a money value behind it for me because it makes me feel good. I can express myself. I can try and help other people. I guess like creativity for me is a very helpful tool to think beyond just making money and proving my worth in some way, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think it's incredible. Like from my perspective, I went to university. I came out with just a general business degree, and most of my peers from either high school or university all went into pretty traditional professional services roles. And it's amazing when, if that's mainly what my environment's very different these days, I guess. But if that's my environment, I remember a friend of mine when they heard that I was going taking a sabbatical and traveling around the world and ending up in a certain part of the world. Like he genuinely, a good friend of mine asked me, like, "Have I joined a cult?" like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I think what you're saying there is very important for anyone who's trying to figure out their own way in life, because if your environment isn't kind of, and it's not that you surround yourself with yes people, right? Like, or just people that won't hold you accountable, or whatever it may be. But I think we have no idea just how influential our environment is in even alluding to what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so it's funny that you say the thing about the cult because I think a lot of my friends from back home in Australia probably thought the same about me moving to Berlin. I mean, I come from like a small country town um, where you go to school, then you kind of get a job or you get married. A lot of people get married in their early 20s. They buy their first house, they have their kids and their car, and they have this kind of life set up, and it's this yeah, like a lot of people tick these boxes, I guess, that they feel like they have to tick off. And I'm not saying it's not a valid way of living at
No,
all.
no,
I think
understood.
they're very content and very happy in those in that environment. But I just knew that that wasn't for me at all. And then I guess like when you're looking in from the outside at my life, for example, living in Berlin, they're kind of like, what are you doing there? Like Berlin's a place of party and hedonism and like what are you doing there? Come
Right.
back and be an adult and get married and do the do the things. So I can relate to that a little bit, I guess.
It's interesting though. I think like it's there's so often we're looking to kind of put these things in competing boxes. And I definitely noticed even on my travels sometimes, like how people would always reflect back to how other people, they're just doing these corporate jobs and they're slaves and blah blah blah. And I'm looking around at a lot of the people and I'm almost like, if you have to contrast your own life with somebody else's to justify your own existence, I think
Mm,
you're already kind of struggling, like, or you're at a disadvantage to actually appreciating your own life. But even just what you said there, if this is, I think, one of the hardest things to identify, and I think what a good life is for some of us, like, is just it's for you, right? It's not about whether it suits everyone else in the village. I'm sure there's people listening that just they there's two people that are doing the exact same job in the exact same, in a very very similar situation, and one of them should be absolutely doing it in my perspective, and there's probably one of them that definitely shouldn't be doing it. Like
yeah,
I think there's
for
something about,
sure.
like, there's something that kind of scratches away at us, like, you know what I mean, or drives us to do some of these things. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's ending up in like there's an external metric to define whether this has been a successful choice or not. Like, it's just something that we felt compelled to do, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that is like the one aspect where I do tend to get a little bit spiritual because I do believe in like we make choices and those choices they set things in motion and like there are so many parallel lives that we could have lived. I could have stayed back home. I could have found the love of my life and like had a wonderful house and children and that would have been a very different but probably a very nice life just as well. So yeah, it's hard to it is weird to compare, you're right, but funnily enough like I've always had a weird thing with comparing my life to others because of my, I guess, unique circumstance of being a teenage mother. I've done everything backwards to other people. And as much as I try to compare myself to other people, like, oh, the girl that I went, or one of my best friends, actually, not just any girl, that one of my best friends that I went to uni with and studied architecture with in Australia, she's, finished with uni. She's a registered architect and she's doing amazing. And I'm just like, why am I not there yet? Like, why am
Yeah.
I not in that position yet? And then I'm like, oh, hang on, but she hasn't done the kid thing yet. And I'm almost done with the kid thing. And it's just, for me, I do catch myself comparing myself to others. I think it's a human thing, but then I always have to like remind myself like there's just no point because you've done everything backwards and yeah.
What was uh what was it like then, the decision to come to Berlin, like in the circumstances there, and even with the younger kid as well and all that? Like what was the like was this something that was always on the cards for you? Like was this something that you thought of spontaneously?
Um, no, it was kind of a plan for a couple of years. I moved here with my ex-partner and he is a musician and he always wanted to be sort of central somewhere in Europe so he could tour for his music. But I put on the brakes for a long time and I wasn't ready to move to Germany. I mean, I grew up in Germany as a child until I was 13, 14, and then I moved to Australia. And my memories of Germany were just like a stinky, small, tiny village and closed-minded people. And so I wasn't really keen to do that again or go back, I guess, go backwards in life. And then I said I want to finish my bachelor in Australia and then I'll think about it. And as soon as I finished my bachelor, we moved to Germany, but never with the intention of staying here. Like the intention was, let's just try it out for 1 to 2 years, see how we feel. And that was really good, I think, because if we had, or if I personally had known this is now maybe the rest of your life or maybe the next 10 years, then I think I would have freaked out and just really been hesitant to move my whole life over. But because we just kind of did it with the intention of trying it out, it felt a lot easier. There was a lot less pressure because if it wasn't going to work out, we could always go back to Australia. And I still have that option, which is a very privileged option. Like if shit hits the fan here, then I can pack up and leave. And, that's a very privileged position to be in, I think.
When you though mentioned even just the way you perceive yourself doing things almost backwards to what everyone else has done it, like you're comparing yourself potentially to your architect friend there, and then you say you're almost done with the child thing at this. Well, obviously never done, but like how's that been to like to navigate that, like to have that as like, because I'm in this weird spot now as well sometimes, even where I don't know. It's hard to think that anything is. It's hard to think that you need to be doing anything different in life when you've got a little child smiling back at you. Sometimes, like I'm not saying that there's like a. I'm not saying that there's like a like it's not stressful or whatever, or there can't be fears with it. But I don't know. There's something really interesting to me, I think, in just like the when we think of our priorities in life, and if we've done something so well in one area of life, like that, like all the other comparison stuff, it when you've kind of done it well in one of the most significant areas, it kind of dissipates as well.
Yeah, definitely. I have a lot of thoughts about this because yeah, it's been the last 13 years, I guess, that I've been confronted with this idea of like, who am I? Where do I want to be? What jobs or whatever. But at the same time, like, who am I as a person? Who am I as a mother? I had to like figure that out for myself very, very early and very fast too. And there's a few things like I'm so grateful for being a mother. I'm so grateful for my younger self of like making that choice and going through with it because it definitely has given my life so much meaning. Obviously, I mean, I don't know if it is that obvious, but to me, it's like I do a job that is full of love and full of meaning, and I get to teach this child about the world, I also have a huge responsibility, which is also very scary. Um, and yeah, I actually talked to a really good friend the other day, and I told her that I was doing this podcast, and I was kind of like, I don't know even what he'd want to talk to me about. I'm not an expert in anything. And she's like, Claire, you're an expert in being the mother of your child. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that is your expertise. Like you are raising a man who is going to be hopefully completely going against the stereotype of what it is to be masculine, or you're already talking to him about toxic masculinity, and you're teaching him about kindness and respect and openness, and in Berlin of all places, like that's your expertise, that's your purpose, and that's the job that you're doing. And I had never even thought about that was something that I might be actually good at doing, or that is, what I guess I'm here to do. Like for me, it's always just a given, and it's just what I do on the side. And it's also not the first thing I tell people that I do. I don't tell them like I'm a mum. I usually tell them, oh, I'm an architect or architecture student. I work in a cafe, and then like third or fourth down the list, it's like, oh, I'm a mum. And
Yeah.
that I guess is a very bizarre thing to do because it takes up literally 100% of my time and is the most meaningful thing that I could do. And you're right, like a lot of other things do fade in comparison when you get to see a human next to you or in front of you that, yeah, is part of you, that comes from you, and that is reflecting what like what you're giving them.
How, like, because I'll just, like, you often see me even in the cafe sometimes, even without like a phone or even something to read, and I just kind of sitting and observing things, and I just like to even in the neighborhood, I just kind of like to watch things go by, if you know what I mean.
I love that.
But it always strikes me like, I don't know, your relationship with your son always strikes me as something very genuine. Like, or I saw him have his arm around your shoulder one day as you're walking past the office space that I'm renting, and I just thought, man, that looks so fucking beautiful, if you know what I mean. Like, how how would you like, or how would you even think of just how you've navigated all of that? Because, like, so for me, even I've come to being a parent at the age of 39, right? And so even from my perspective, even look, I wouldn't change anything because my daughter wouldn't be the same child that it is, right? But
Yeah, of course.
optimally, I'd love to have maybe been more ready in my early 30s or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, or maybe
Yeah, yeah.
even whatever. Like, and not even just thinking on a timeline, but just age gaps and whatever, whatever way your
Mm.
mind works, right? But like, I'm almost grateful for the fact that I didn't have a child when I was 28, because my toes, when describing having a child, when a friend said they were 26 or 28, my toes instantly curled up at the thought of what sort of steward or guide I would have been as a parent at that stage.
Mm.
So when I see from it, albeit from a distance, with you and your child or your son, like, it's kind of remarkable to me that things seem to be the way they are. And we have frank discussions sometimes where you're not sugarcoating anything,
Yeah.
but that still seems to be the case.
Um, yeah, I will tell you straight away, it's not always easy, and there are so many things that I do wrong for sure. And I think the whole age and age gap thing is like, it's the same as one size doesn't fit all. I think you can probably have a really amazing relationship, which I do have with my son, and the small age gap there is, but it can probably also be very problematic because I also notice I am very like, especially now as he's turning, like he's a teenager, which means he's very independent, which means I've regained a lot of my independence and my freedom. And suddenly my selfish, like my ego is just coming out loud and strong because everything that I've missed in the last 13 years, I want to do now. I want to party. I want to run away. I want to go traveling. And it's just like constant, this
Yeah.
need for, I just want to put myself first. So I know how to rein that in. And I know that it's also allowed, that like I'm allowing myself to have these moments. But I'm sure that can also, yeah, like, I don't know, it's a fine balance, and it's a fine, yeah, it's a balance that I have to find every day of like, how can I fill my cup and like not put myself last, because it's important, I think, to put yourself first as a parent as well, so that you can be a good parent, but also how can I put my child first? And it's not always easy to get that balance right. But I'm really happy, like, for the relationship that we have, because I guess I'm very involved in his life, which maybe one day later he'll reflect back on and be like, my mum was overbearing as hell. Like, she knew way too much about my life, so maybe that'll be an issue later down the line, which is fine. But we also have really beautiful conversations, and he sends me TikTok videos, and I send him little videos because we can kind of relate on this level, which is funny.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess it's very different to the relationship that I have with my parents, where there's a lot more distance and it's a lot more, yeah, conservative, I guess. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I don't think it matters really about the age difference. I think it just matters that you have conversations all the time. As soon as your child can start speaking, it's important to sit down with them and be interested in them. I think that's a really big part. Like, I genuinely am interested in my son's life, and how he feels about things and what his opinions are on things. Like, I love hearing this, so I love having these conversations with him, and I think that's a big part in creating a good relationship with your children.
Yeah, I think and I think it happens even I even see it with, like, friends around my age, whether that's they could be 10 or 20 years older than me or 10 or 20 years younger than me, and there's like a big difference almost in the quality of relationships that I see sometimes. And it's not always just based on the generations, if you know what I mean, because there's anomalies within all different age groups. But I don't know, there's something, if there's almost like a friendship or like a curiosity, it and of course, like, a parent has to be a steward of a child's life, like, there's that dynamic to get right, I'm sure. But the way I see it is, like, I see some of my friends have genuinely they've become friends with their parents. Like, as an adult, they've met their parent again as an adult, and it's not that they don't go back home and it's falling into. Of course, there's always going to be that parent-child dynamic, but I
Hmm.
do think that there's something really interesting about the quality or the dynamic of the relationship. This goes for any relationship too, but when you can just start meeting each other a little bit eye to eye, when you have a big curiosity about, like, how do you see the world? Like, I think there's something magic that happens with that. So I really like this sense of I'm interested, because I don't know, as much as I think, there's what I found really off putting about becoming a parent lately is, like, I'm almost avoiding other new parents. Because they're just telling me about all these ways and these techniques and these products that they're buying, and the stress of you have to get them into the right school or keep it at the right time, and all of this stuff. And I'm just like, like, the two things I'm armed with is, like, I want to love it and pay attention to her, and ideally that that I can be present. Like, do you know what I mean? And kind of hanging on the idea that we've raised children in caves before, like, so.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
worked
like,
out fine then. It'll work out fine now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I have a lot of issues with this, funnily enough. When I got pregnant at 16, I had 16-year-old friends telling me, "Oh, you need to breastfeed. Oh, you shouldn't breastfeed it. You need to do this." And I was like, "Hang on a minute. Who are you to tell me?" So it wasn't just coming from my peers, it was coming from, older women, of course, other mothers. I think I went to mum's group once, and I was 16, the other women were in their 30s, and talking about nappies and what brands of nappies to buy. And I just zoned out because it just also didn't interest me. Like, I had other things on my mind as a 16-year-old, such as, like, I need to finish high school. I need to go back and do my homework. And so it just wasn't, my focus, I guess. And I think if I was to become a parent again, I think that would look very different. Maybe I would actually be really interested in what nappies to buy, but I do have an issue with people giving each other advice on very personal matters such as raising children. Because I think what might work for one person definitely won't work for the other person. And yeah, I had a close friend. She just gave birth. Like I'm now friends are suddenly having babies, and it's really interesting because I have a teenager, and they come to me and they're like, "Claire, what's your advice?" You know, in a very generalized way, of course. But I just kind of say, I don't have any advice for you. I don't want to give you any advice. Like I'm there if you need me for sure, but I can't just give you a notebook full of little tips like I can't do that. I don't feel comfortable doing that because I think you will figure it out yourself, and I think you need to trust yourself and just listen to your gut on a lot of things as well.
What was that experience like being in a prenatal course or whatever, and like surrounded by potentially 30-year olds? Like, was that like? Did you ever find yourself in certain situations in life where you're just like, "What the fuck?" Like, or
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I would not recommend becoming a teenage mom to anybody. I'm really lucky in that I think I was very naive when I was young, and I kind of just didn't think about these kind of things. Like I made the decision and I was comfortable with the decision. I wasn't forced into the decision. It was my free will, to
yeah,
become a mother. And then, but I didn't think beyond that. I didn't think like how it would affect my life. I didn't really think about what others would think of me, which luckily I didn't, because I think once you do start to think about that, you can go make yourself a little crazy. But yeah, there was definitely there's been I can't even tell you how many times I've been approached by older in back in the day older people saying, "Oh, you look way too young to have a child," or you
right,
know, is that or even my son now still gets asked like, "Is that your sister?" Or
right,
is
right.
that your mum? So this happens a lot, and I've grown such a thick skin over the years that I really don't think about it anymore. But at the start, there were a few times where it really like I was breastfeeding in a fancy restaurant with my seniors, like my high school jumper, this hoodie where it said 2010 seniors or something, and he was screaming, and the only way to get him to shut up was to breastfeed him. And there was people staring at me, and I think my face was glowing red. I felt so much embarrassment and shame. I hated it.
Yeah.
um yeah, so wouldn't recommend. It's not a fun experience, but I was very lucky in that I had a good community around me. I had very supportive parents, siblings, like I wasn't on my own.
Yeah, I remember one of our first chats and you were telling me about this. So like I just I don't know, I had a huge amount of like admiration or respect. I know you said like you didn't know what was coming when you made this choice, but like what a I don't know, like what an experience to go through to shape you potentially as an adult, like to have to have experiences where you're feeling that and still coming through it, like and carrying on with it, and then having a wonderful relationship with your son, and for all the things that you were saying, like of how you're teaching him in the world and how you're having these conversations, explaining things in a very open manner, and you're curious, like it's I don't know. I think like it's something whenever I hear you talk about that, I'm just like, man, that's huge fucking respect for like. I know you don't kind of have a choice once you go ahead with the initial, as you know. And I say that even as someone who's married and is late,
Yeah.
in his late 30s having a child. Like I was fully aware of like fucking hell, like all through the pregnancy, thinking like, and it's a weird comparison, but it's almost like maybe it's a very strange comparison, but sometimes if I take a large dose of psychedelics in a kind of an exploratory thing, we're in isolation in a confined space, like not socially. There's a
Mm.
moment where I do it and I take them and I'm like, oh fuck, like whatever's coming my way now is coming my way.
Yeah,
And with going through the whole pregnancy thing and whatever, and now having a child, like there's no escape from it. Like
there's
and
only forward. There's
yeah,
literally, there's, yeah. Yep. I mean, I think what helps, and because there will be times, there will be countless times where you don't necessarily regret your choice. I don't think I've ever like had a thought of like, oh, I regret this, but definitely where you're having times of like, this sucks.
right.
And I think it's really important to let yourself feel that without any shame, because maybe, I don't know how you as a father feel about it, but I think women have been conditioned and socialized to think that we're super maternal, we're super caring, we love caring for others, and we love being a mother, and we're going to be the best mother, and we can do it all. I think that's bullshit in to some extents, because there are days where I really hate it and I just want to crawl in my bed and not do any of it. And I give myself the grace of like, it's okay to
Yeah,
feel like this, because then I can push forward again. Like then, after you take a breather and you kind of just acknowledge, like, okay, today is just shit. Like today it sucks to be a mum.
yeah,
Then you can keep on doing what you need to do, rather than kind of sit in shame. Like I shouldn't be feeling like this. I should love my child,
yeah.
and I
But
do, but sometimes,
like you know, I can my Ifa and I, my wife, can say to each other sometimes like you know, oh man, I hate you right now, like, and you know, it may be followed up quite briefly with the but I love you, like you know what I
yeah.
mean, like, but like there's I don't know, I think there's such an obligation or pressure. I find this really enjoyable about some of the open kind of conversations I'm used to having, particularly with people that have had children, and in some case hearing about postnatal depression, in some cases just hearing about the sheer strain and stress of it. Like, you know, we've had a very kind of, I think, anomalous experience in that we were kind of prepared for anything, and it's been relatively harmonious, if you know what I mean. But whatever
Hmm.
was going to come our way was going to come our way, and even within that, like as a father, like, you know, I remember having a moment in the hospital just after a couple of days when it's not like my whole world had been turned upside down at this stage. You're still in the hospital and you can press a button, you know, if you need help. But I remember just being acutely aware of like, oh, my missus now has a very. I just felt it straight away. She has a number one priority in her life, which isn't me anymore. And
Yeah.
and you know, even when I hear some people talk about being a parent and they go, "Oh, I felt this instant connection," that's absolutely not how I experience it. Like when Ava came out, she grabbed my finger and I cried. Like, you know, so I'm not saying that there wasn't a moment of like emotional connection or something, but I'm building that. Like, I'm feeling it more and more as even she
Hmm.
engages more with me. But I remember definitely just feeling like a sense of like I hadn't felt insecure in this relationship, and like moments of insecurity were coming up in me. Now I'm grateful that I can just say that to my missus, and she's not like going pandering to me, going, "Oh no, I still love you," or
Yeah.
you know what I mean. But like just that it can just be acknowledged, because when I talk to so many other parents, there's so many universal things that I think people feel an obligation to say, like a reaction that they're supposed to have, and it's I don't know, we're still humans, like,
Yeah.
and at times we just want to suit ourselves, and at times we I don't know, at times like I can say some of the most loving things, and I can say the most like hurtful things. Do you know what I mean? And that's still me,
Yeah.
whether I'm a father or not.
Yeah. I guess it's really like you're lucky to have a good communication with your wife, because if you can just say those things out loud, like it makes it so much easier, doesn't it? Because you
Yeah,
can just meet each other halfway. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I've never really, I guess I've never thought about what it's like to have another person in
yeah,
this and care, like to yeah, and I guess it was very hard for me to be a single mother always, that no question about it. But at the same time, I'm kind of lucky. I'm kind of happy that I didn't have to also maintain a romantic relationship at the same
Right.
time, especially in the first like 2 years, where really, like, especially as a woman, your body is just touched out. Like, you don't want anybody to touch you. Yeah, your child is your focus. And then you have to work on another relationship as well. Wow, that's crazy. Why do we humans do that? It's what? What were you thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's there's something in life where I don't think and it's why it kind of bugs me just the I don't know the simplistic or binary way that we kind of label things as a good or a bad thing or the right or the wrong thing. Like there's so much complexity even within things that we wouldn't even take back. You know, like we're both saying in this case, like, oh yeah, definitely wouldn't take this back. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Like, but there's so much complexity even within that. And I don't know, for me personally, that's what I even when trying to have conversations or create content, like, or to write things or to express views, it is just to show the kind of, there's way more nuance to this than just like just because I say something may be good, it doesn't mean that it's always good. It doesn't mean that it doesn't leave
yeah,
me with mad doubt sometimes or uncertainty, or it doesn't mean that I don't have I don't know, the crippling sense of being a human and the complexity in my mind or an insecurity or worries or
mm-hmm,
doubts or things like this that unfold.
yeah. And you saying that, like, it's gonna make other people feel a lot more um relieved, I guess, that they're not the only one going through that, because you're right, it's oh, it is complex for sure. And yeah, I guess I'm lucky. Like, to me, that isn't a new thought. I have a good close circle of friends who you know most of as well.
Yeah.
And we have these conversations all the time because each one of us has their own ups and downs in life, and then we discuss these ups and downs, and we're there for each other. And it's just so nice to be able to be there and listen and know that we don't have to be happy all the time, or we're not going to be sad forever, or it's not going to be stressful for the rest of it. Like, it's when you see other people going through things and talking about also complex issues, whatever that, whether that be relationship with your parents or things like that, it immediately gives you something to reflect back on and kind of think like, oh yeah, I'm not alone in this, and I'm not the only one feeling this.
Yeah, I think that's I was telling you just before this that I started these kind of conversation circles as well. And even somebody last night and it mentions like, oh, it's such a relief to hear somebody reflect back some of the same things that I'm experiencing. And I don't know, like I think this is such a like this for me is a I wouldn't say like non-negotiable, but like it's a fundamental part of a good life for me, is that sense of like I've got some people that I can express these things to. And
Yeah,
I love the way you even described it there. Like it's not that you're saying that I go to this group and they prescribe me a bunch of solutions. You said you listen to each other. And then it's not that you suddenly know that your problems are over. It's just that I've just by virtue of the fact of hearing almost potentially the entire thread of somebody else's experience, I can literally see an in-person up close example of how this too shall pass, or this will end,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just like happiness may come again, sadness
yeah,
may come again.
exactly. Yeah, community, that's what it's all about, I think. Just having a community, or being part of a community, or creating a community. I think that it's that's what it's about.
And for you, even in Berlin, because I feel like I've had the opposite experience when I hear Berlin's a very lonely city, or like the different things. And I fully appreciate the sentiment of that. And I heard the same thing when I was in London as well. Um, has that been a process? Has that been a realization for you, or is that something that has always been quite clear to you?
Oh, how long have we got? No, I'm joking. No, honestly, I thought moving to Berlin, I would be totally fine. My native, like the language that I grew up speaking is German. So I kind of went into this project, to this new life chapter, thinking I'll be fine. I'm going to make so many friends, whatever. And then I moved here and I was so lonely and depressed for 2 years, like, or 18 months, let's say. I'd never felt more lonely. I was in a weird part of Berlin. I was in West Berlin and Charlottenburg, so there wasn't much going on there. And I was stuck at home with my then 6-year-old child, so I wasn't really able to go out much. I had a partner who was constantly working or touring, and I had no, well, I had a few friends, but I had very little friends, and oh, yeah, I struggled a lot. And then something happened, I guess getting to know the place a bit more and getting to know people a bit better, and the friends that I met, the friendships sort of deepened. And then after 2 years, something shifted, and I suddenly felt like I belonged, and I felt like, oh, this is not so bad, and this city isn't so bad. I've just had this kind of grey fog in front of my eyes for the last 2 years, and yeah, I guess for me, hospitality, it's a love hate relationship. I've been doing it for the last 15 years as like a side job. And I love it because it brings me closer to people and I get to know people and I meet people from all sorts of backgrounds, whether it be customers or whether it just be the people that I'm working with. And I've worked in so many different cafes in Berlin and I've met so many cool people that for me, that's always been the key to integrating here or to making it feel home to me, to just, yeah, work in a place that you get to meet people. I think that's been literally the key in making Berlin feel like home. And I've been here 8 years now, if not longer, and I love it. Yeah, I now, especially the neighborhood that we live in, I love it. I love that everyone kind of knows each other and that you can say hi to each other in the street or in the supermarket and you recognize people. It's wonderful. I love it.
Like it's really it's really like I never thought that I'd feel this. There is something really nice in this neighborhood. Like I've some people that I've seen some or followed the newsletter that this podcast is a part of before will have heard me comment on the fact that like it's hard to kind of articulate how good it makes me feel to walk down the street, like let's say to my local supermarket 500 meters away, and potentially just have three or four hellos. Even if like, I've mentioned before that there's some people I just say hello to because I made an effort when I got here, like, coming from Peru before and how everyone would just say like Buenos dias, Buenos tardes, and like all this sort of stuff as you're just walking into town and you'd never know anything about these people other than you say this and they make eye contact. And I used to always say to if and we're there, I just fucking love that. Like, so when we
Mm,
got to Berlin, the thing that I was so focused on doing was like saying like, Guten Morgen in my Irish accent.
yeah.
And of course I get tumbleweed here for months, like,
I was going to say that would have freaked people
yeah,
out.
yeah.
What does he want from me?
Yeah, I know. Like, so I have my German wife beside me who's almost like I can feel her every time I'm doing it, like almost like tensing up, going, "Oh, please stop doing this." And then, but eventually, it got to a point where there's people now that I still say hello to in this neighborhood that have never spoken to me,
Mm,
but I get a huge friendly like wave from across the road. And of course,
Cool.
some of these things have turned into proper conversations. But I do think that there is something quite unique in our little neighborhood here. Of like, it's a little corner of Berlin or something where it actually feels like its own little, I don't know, its own little village, and it's just like a very normal. It could happen anywhere, if you know what I mean. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I
I don't know if it can happen anywhere, to be honest, because I think it takes a unique set of like an infrastructure of, for example, we all live in apartments, so we don't have our own private backyard that we hang out in. So we do use the public spaces available to us. There are amenities close to us, such as shops, so we do walk the same routes and whatever. I think that from an urban design or from an architecture perspective, that actually makes a lot of sense in creating that kind of sense of community when you have all these things close together. A little cafe on the corner that people can go to. Because coming from Australia, where it's a lot more typical to live in the suburbs, and living in the suburbs means you have your own house that you may be renting or own, it doesn't really matter, and you have your own backyard that's fenced off to the neighbors, and the fence is so high that you cannot actually physically peek over the fence. It means you never really come into contact with your neighbors, and everybody drives cars. Even, my son's childcare center was maybe like 800 meters down the road. I wouldn't walk him there. I'd drive him there because then I'd drive to uni.
right.
And it means that this kind of community building, this neighborhood building, doesn't really take place because everybody lives very isolated from each other. They live in their kind of nuclear family home, and they don't cross paths with people that they usually wouldn't even hang out with. Like they hang out with their kind of close friends and whatever, but not with people that you just randomly stumble across and then randomly figure out, oh, we actually might have something in common. And I think in cities, it's a lot more common that that happens. But then, yeah, there is still something nice and unique about our neighborhood, I think, because you're right, it doesn't happen on every street, on
Yeah.
every neighborhood.
It's like I definitely think that even when you were talking about your experience, and I've definitely experienced like like I've moved country 5 times, so even when I came here with Ifa, that like I said to her, because she was kind of conscious of me coming to her country, then like how I was going to feel. And I remember after a couple of months even saying like, oh no, I'm feeling this loneliness now, like. And she was she saw me going to nearly every kind of different event. On like, I was happy to go on my own, meet new people. Like, there were people already in my life even at that stage where I felt a bit lonely. Because
Mm,
you can still have people in your life, but if they're not like real connections, like, or if you're not kind of having the kind of depth of conversation, because it hasn't been earned yet. You know what I mean? Like, I know you
yeah,
can have intimacy straight away and you can get into deep and meaningfuls, but they're still not the people that you'd call at 3 or 4 in the morning. Um,
exactly.
but it is really, I don't know. I really think that's one of the most underappreciated and the most simple and obvious contributors to the way I feel in my life, is having like a, not even just friends in the city, but even just so many people I know in my neighborhood. Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
so different to other places that I've lived in from that perspective.
absolutely. I mean, we also like live in a society that tells us to be, what's the word for it, like individualist, or like to be in competition with everyone, or work your way up to the top, like all these kind of capitalist ideas of like how we should be living our lives. And it that kind of is the opposite to that, like, oh no, it helps to be connected to other people for no other purpose than to just be connected and to wave to each other on the street or get that friendly smile from somebody who recognizes you. Like, it's just, there's nothing you gain from it other than a feeling of like, oh, it's nice to feel seen here. It's nice to be welcomed here, you know?
Yeah, I think that sense of, in so many of these interviews that I've done, like, I think that sentiment of to be seen has come up so many times. And I think it even, I don't know, even just with the idea of raising a child again, like, I don't know, that's kind of just been imprinted in my head, like, of just pay attention, let the child know that they're seen, if you know what I mean. And I don't know, because there's something, I see it when I just say hello to people sometimes, even if it's someone I haven't met yet. And it's one of my, almost like when I'm planting seeds, it's one of my early Guten
Hmm.
Morgens, like, you know, like when they're kind of half like, well, who's this weird guy again?
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes, even if it's someone who I vaguely know and you say like hello to or good morning to, I can sometimes see the transition in someone's face where they may be kind of locked in. This is what maybe just what my projection is, but their face looks even a little bit strained. And just the fact that someone has looked in their eyes and said good morning, a smile, like very often I just see a smile break across their face. And the way I always interpret it is, it's just like, I'm big into self inquiry and stuff like this, and sitting with stuff and
Yeah.
time by myself. And what I think that's massively important in my own perspective or understanding of life, just sometimes that can be too much too. And, you know, if you're saying that if someone's working, maybe if they're even living on their own, or maybe they work from home, I think just these small moments of connection,
Hmm.
and small moments of just being seen again. I don't know. I think it can be as simple as that sometimes, in what we can afford each other.
For sure. Maybe we should change it takes a village to raise a child to it takes a village to live a good life.
Yeah.
Like it takes, you know, a community to, yeah, yeah, feel seen. And in order, like, if you feel seen and if you feel this like spark of like, oh, somebody appreciates me being here this morning at 7 a.m. walking my dog or something, we can carry that forward. We can integrate it into our next encounter with the next person and pass it forward, you know. Yeah. Except today when I was like crying walking down the street, I was like, I do not want to walk into anybody right now. I don't want anybody to recognize me. That would have been absolute horror to me, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Duly noted.
It happens so rarely, and then of course it happens when I'm out in public. It's just like,
Yeah,
but maybe the universe is looking out for me and going, "No, Claire, the path is free. You can walk home. Nobody's going to see you. It's
yeah.
fine."
Which, you know, which I think is the other part of it too. Like sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes if we are in a, if not necessarily, doesn't mean that we're in a shitty mood if we're crying, or that things are a bit heavy or whatever it may be.
Mm,
Sometimes, like, it's that dance between like, sometimes it's nice to be comforted, and sometimes it's just nice to have the space to just not explain anything to anyone,
yeah.
not perform for anyone, and just like, oh, today is one of those days.
Yeah, for sure. But that's when you take the back roads. Then you don't walk past the cafe, you just take the back street, and that's fine. That's the beauty of living in a grid. You can just like take a different street.
Absolutely, absolutely. Claire,
Yeah.
just like over the course of the conversation, we kind of started out with you asking yourself the question of like, what the hell do I want to do? Who am I? To kind of even just your own explore, and even just moving to Berlin, even your experiences of being a teenage mother, what you've learned from that experience, even what we were talking about in terms of like the expectations sometimes on us as people to perform a certain way in certain roles, and letting go of some of those expectations as well. You know, even the ideas then of like, and the real significance of clearly something we both share as well, of this need for community, this satisfaction of in the community that we both happen to be in. And just as I tend to ask the question at the end of these conversations, it's, what is a good life for you, Claire?
I've been scared of this question for the entire length of this conversation because I don't have an answer for you. No, no, sorry. Um, it's a tough question. I mean, I think when you summarize it like that, all those things contribute to a good life. I'm a very extroverted person and I love sharing and I love sharing my experience and talking about my experience. And I think I like doing that because I want people or anybody who might be going through something similar to me, I want them to feel like they're going to be okay. So I guess a good life for me would be like being able to help others through sharing my experience. It, whether it is in my community or further than that. And I just, it's important to me to like find a balance between helping others, giving myself the time and the rest that I need in order to put it forward, and yeah, just having a sense of meaning in my life. That's important to me more than anything else.
And just out of interest, the things that bring you most meaning at this point in time are?
The relationship with my son, um, relationship with my friends, learning. Just I love learning. That gives me a lot of meaning. Just learning about new things, and that can be through consuming things or just conversations. I knew, like, going into this conversation with you, that was something that I looked forward to the most, just learning something new, whether it be about you or about our dynamic or whatever. I knew like this was going to be good for me. So, and I think this is what I go into a lot of things in my life. Like, I really love learning and requiring new knowledge. So anything to me, any experience to me is an opportunity for more knowledge and more experience. And so I tend to like dive headfirst into those kind of things.
Well, Claire, I hope this experience didn't disappoint you then on that front.
Not at all.
But
I had a lot of fun.
great. Look, Claire, thank you so much for joining us here on the What is a Good Life podcast. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed what you shared. Just like as I said to you before in the cafe with your newsletter, which I'll have a link to with this podcast as well. I just really enjoyed I don't know, like the lack of bullshit or projection or like performance. Anytime I talk to you, it's always an absolute breath of fresh air. So I hope anyone who's listening will also check out your newsletter as well. And yeah, I'll look forward to future conversations, which we'll no doubt have.